Hello, it's really nice to have you here. This is my first real podcast episode with an industry expert. I'm talking to Rod Foley, who is one of 3 owners in the company FrankWorks, who manufactured and designed this shoe. It's a very unusual and interesting tennis/pickleball shoe, but it caught my attention for several reasons. Every now and then I check out a product because it kind of triggers me, but it also promises some interesting innovations where if it's actually good, it would be really amazing. And an example of that would be this strap right here. After hearing some good things from people that I actually trust quite a lot, I wanted to give this shoe a chance, and I'm really glad I did because this shoe is actually quite innovative and highly functional. Industry expert in the designing and manufacturing of shoes for over 20 years. We have conversations that touch on topics like the dilemmas a shoe company might face in the earlier stages when they want to innovate a product, but the status quo in the shoe culture and industry is defined by massive brands like Nike and Adidas and so on. Sharing our opinions on what the perfect tennis shoe should be. It was a very fun conversation, and it was an honor to have Rod Foley on as one of my first guests, and I hope to, in the future, have him back as well as other industry experts. So thank you again so much for tuning in. This is my first podcast. It's great to have you here. And if you're interested in checking out sponsors, affiliate links, discounts on some of my favorite products, all of that stuff is in the description below. So be sure to check that out. And without further ado, let's just get into the video. So we got through the technical issues. Awesome. Yeah, I love the background. So are all of those FrankWorks shoes? It looks like the signature lacing strap system.
Yeah, so those are, some of this stuff is like, going through the process of building a shoe, the first thing you got to do is pick a last. Mm-hmm. That green thing up at the top there. Come on. Yeah, you settle on a last to make sure, it really drives everything. It drives not only the fit, but the dimensions you can do on the outsole and the midsole. So this is the key choice you have to make, which obviously it's a 3D shape. There's infinite possibilities and infinite ways to screw up and make the wrong choice. But so what you do before you spend all the money to make a midsole and cut all those dies and the tooling sets is this is a piece of foam that's been cut, laser cut, with the upper that's been built on that last that I just showed you to confirm, does it fit the way you think it does? Does it behave as you hoped? And again, this is rough. This is a really kind of, quick down and dirty thing. So you can't read everything because there's not all the layers on here that we would have, but you get a sense for how is this thing going to fit, and should we move forward now and doing all that expensive work of making midsole molds and outsole molds and everything else. Is this good enough? Is this what we thought it was? So there's a lot of the stuff behind me is just stages of that development. And then there's some just iterations of samples with different choices of materials and patterns and whatnot. So it's just kind of the whole life of the shoe. Interesting.
And how do you make a last? Because it looks like something that's actually molded in that case. It's not like a 3D printed last. How many?
Yeah, so there are a few mold makers in the world. Most athletic shoe brands that you know of uses the same one out of Boston. These guys are master craftsmen. It's called, oh wow, it just escaped my brain. It'll come back. But you start with some reference samples, and we want it to fit like this in the heel and like this shoe in the forefoot and this shoe in the midfoot. You kind of give them, because the chances are they've made those lasts for all those shoes. So they can kind of help you kind of guide you through and make decisions, because any little decision you make has a bang on effect from a 3D perspective that you may not be able to predict. So these guys have been doing it for forever and for everyone. So they really are the ones that can kind of get you in a good place so you don't make too many mistakes to start off. And then it's iterative. So we did get that first sample back that I just showed you, and we didn't like the way the length and the forefoot kind of worked. So we made some tweaks. And so before we invested a whole bunch of money, we were able to just buy, have them build them the last for a nominal fee. And then you go and resample that up and make sure it fits the way you expect. So yeah, just knowing the right vendor in that case, who to go to make your last for you. Yeah.
Oh wow, okay. That's more specialized than I would have expected, but it makes sense. Yeah, and I think the shoes are one of those things where micro details can make a night and day difference, but it's also like you have to widen the aperture so that each size of the shoe still fits a wide enough audience, because everyone's foot shape is different. So you have to kind of go down the middle of everyone's foot variations, right? Somehow. So that's tricky.
Yeah. You build to the averages, and no one has an average foot. Yeah. So
exactly.
You just hope your average is a good enough average for enough of the people that you're targeting. Yeah. It's Yeah, it's a bit of a roll of the dice every time you do it. And it's why when brands get to a last that they like, that works for enough people, they're very reluctant to change it, because you may gain a bunch more people, but chances are you're going to lose the people that already love you and have been espousing what a great fit you are and why they love your shoe. And all of a sudden you change the last, you can take those people right out of your shoe. It's happened to me in my past lives, and it's not a great feeling. Yeah, so there's a lot of inertia in a last, and to keep it and just kind of try to tweak around it. The challenge is there's only so much you can tweak around it to fundamentally change the way something fits and feels. So it's a kind of dance with the devil a little bit, to be honest.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So
you've got a burgeoning interest in footwear, it seems, based on our back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I think what happens is, I run into a lot of things that feel like they could be better or something. I mean, it could be in any product, and you get curious enough, or maybe passionate enough, or maybe you push the limits enough, and you just start to, at least if you're me, start to obsess about one or two details that are consistently disappointing across that product from different brands, for example. And right now with shoes, it's like, and I think this question is kind of being answered in the more common industries like running or something, but I am absolutely sick of how often toe boxes are just crunching people's toes. I mean, that offends me at this point, to be honest. But yeah, it's gotten to the point that even Amazon has a lot of pretty affordable and decent quality barefoot style shoes with a wide, foot shaped toe box and so on. And I wonder how long it'll take until that, I don't know if it's like a trickle up or trickle down thing, but I guess a bit of both. When is that going to define or heavily influence the way that maybe basketball shoes are made or tennis shoes are made? Because right now I don't really see a shift in those industries so much, but I do think actually your shoe is more of it incorporates more of that thoughtful foot design than other brands, for sure. Like Nike's on the opposite end.
It's so funny you bring this. I just had a back and forth with a customer the other day who bought our shoe really hoping, kind of what you're expressing, like it was going to fit him like his Altra does, for example, right? With that really oblique toe and that really kind of obvious foot shape. And unfortunately, we weren't quite wide enough to capture his pinky toe. So he's like, before going out and playing it, I love the idea. I wish it worked, but it doesn't work for me. Thank you. No problem. And the back and forth I had with him is, like you said, in running, it's a having made running shoes for 20 years, it's a lot easier to make an accommodating forefoot when you're just going fore and aft, right? Versus when you get into a tennis shoe. And again, this is I don't think there's no ill will from a manufacturing standpoint from the bigger brands that have been making tennis shoes. But I guarantee you, what they've heard over the years is, my foot's sliding too much in here. I got tennis toe. It's excruciating. I can't believe. Don't make the shoes too wide. So they've learned over time to make those forefoot so narrow that there's nowhere you can go. I mean, you're just in there like a cast. Okay, you solved one problem, but you've created a massive problem for not only the people that like that, but all for the rest of the people who really don't like it, because their toes are on top of each other, their bunions, everything's happening. Yeah. So there's a balance between how wide can you go and still capture the forefoot so that your person isn't sliding around. So it's the law of averages. Like, what average can I pick that's going to work for enough people like you that want a wider forefoot, but it's still not going to be so wide for so many that they find it useless because they're sliding around too much inside the shoe and causing other problems. Yeah. So, for us, as been making a lot of shoes, our first tennis shoe, that was honestly, it's funny you bring it up, because it was the first reason we said we've got to do this, because we did notice how narrow so many other shoes were. We're like, oh, there's an opportunity here and a need. And we, just by trolling the internet a little bit and seeing what tennis players were talking about and looking for, a lot of people in your camp of going, can somebody just make something that actually fits my forefoot and I don't have to feel like I'm being punished when I play the game I love? But then again, it's the last. How far do you go? How wide do you go? And part of that process for us was pushing pretty wide, and then even having the last maker say, "We've made a lot of tennis shoes. We don't know we'd go that wide." Kind of that back and forth, just to be careful what you wish for, what you do. So there is a iterative process there. So for us, it's like the first model year of a car. We feel really proud of a lot of stuff we've done. We also know there are things we can do differently going forward, and hearing from people with similar wants and wishes and being offended by the way things are is very, very helpful for us to determine where we go next. So it's good.
Awesome. Yeah, that is interesting too. And it's like, I guess this is true for a lot of things, and shoes especially perhaps, but you kind of have to shoot for the average of cultures as well, because I think how people think of a shoe and how their foot should feel inside of a shoe or something, or just the concept that, feels terrible now, but it's I'm gonna break the shoe in kind of thing. I think a lot of that, it's the culture, and how far can you deviate from that, even if in the long run your shoe ends up being, maybe a pioneer of better thinking or something. How much does the company innovating the product and spending money innovating the product have to suffer through a culture that is resistant to a more forward-thinking design, even if it ultimately does represent the better thing?
It's what I think about every day. It's exactly it.
Yeah.
How far can you go? And we could be a pariah or a somebody looks back at 10 years well, those guys tried it, but oh well, they're not around anymore because they tried it. Or those guys started something or pushed something that other people weren't pushing. That's the kind of the kind of balance we're trying to strike, and make sure that we're good and we're appealing to enough people now so that we can do the kind of things that really push things forward and bring more foot health into the sport, because it's astounding the percentage of people that we talk to that are just suffering through problems with their feet. 50-year-old people that are just oh yeah, no, my feet are jacked. I mean, there's no solving that. I'm just looking for a little tiny relief when I'm on the court. It's wow. It is definitely different than running. Running, because of the way the shoes have been built, in my experience, there's a lot less of these kind of problems in running, because there are a lot more options as far as fit goes, as far as what the culture accepts, as far as, just the fact that Altra exists. With that, that was making an oblique toe like that, where the toe is so pronounced and it's really like a foot shape, was such a, you could get fired at brands for suggesting that, because it was just not beautiful. That's not commercial. You'll never sell that. And Grant, guys, that brand, a couple guys in Utah changed the thinking of what is acceptable. So kudos to them. And that's the kind of bravery that's going to be needed to get people kind of thinking and looking at this differently than they do now.
Yeah, definitely. And even that brand, outside of the niche that does follow Altra, its customers and so on, you'll see a lot of resistance. Just, if I'm out in my Altras or something, people might, comment on make the whole clown shoes comment or something like that. But I think it's one of those things, once you transition into the shoe, you start respecting how your foot should fit in a shoe and so on, you probably won't go back. So I feel like the people who take whatever shoe niche they're in, whether it's tennis or running and so on, once they push their audience in that direction and have some success, I don't think that those people would really go back to the narrow toe box shoe. I don't think that they would, agree. Right? Totally agree. And there's so many athletic advantages to being able to splay your toes a little bit. I mean, I think people underestimate how much stability there is, when your foot's, got your toes like this or like this. I mean, it's massive how much you can kind of claw into the ground. And so all that feels lost in a shoe that crunches the toe box too much. And, over the years, I think the problems can work their way up, your ankles, your knees, et cetera, all this compensatory movement, especially on running is so repetitive. So all this stress from the feet not planting optimally does, I think, work its way up. And over 10 or 20 years, I think it could really show in your body in some way. So yeah, it upsets me that shoes still are that way. It upsets me that the industry seems to insist that shoes should be that way, in the culture too, in a lot of ways. But I feel the shift. And I'd love to see that shift happen in a tennis shoe more and more.
Yeah, and I think it's going to take, whether it's, hopefully it's us and others like us. I do think it's going to take, like in running, it's going to take an upstart brand. And it's, you're very unlikely to be working at a major brand where, first of all, tennis is a small part of their portfolio. And so that's one thing against you as far as really doing something different. So there's not a lot of upside to gain in their, from the management perspective. But also hey man, we're ticking along. We're doing just fine. Tennis or pickle, whatever they're doing. You don't need to be, trying to be a hero here. So there's a lot of reasons why there aren't a lot of new things happening. But just like in running, it took the brands like Hoka, brands like On, brands like Altra to bring in new ideas that you now see, a Nike doing things that they wouldn't have done without Hoka having existed. That used to never happen. Nike prided itself never following anybody. And now, a brand like Hoka has literally changed the whole market. I talk about when I was at Mizuno in 2000, I think it was 2007, maybe 2008, we built a racing shoe called the Wave Universe, which was 3 ounces, and the forefoot was 5 millimeters thick. It was incredible, and it actually felt somewhat cushioned. But that was the state-of-the-art thinking around a racing shoe, a marathon racing shoe, 15 years ago, basically. Now that same shoe would be not 5 millimeters thick, but maybe 45, 50 millimeters thick and stiff with a carbon plate. Like everything has changed. And I do credit a lot of that, just, the maximal kind of idea that Hoka introduced has just spurned a whole bunch of new innovation across all sorts of different ways of thinking about a running shoe. And what makes a great running shoe now is completely different than what made a great running shoe 10, 15 years ago. So, but it came from an outsider, someone trying something different, someone who didn't have a lot to lose because they were starting from zero, bringing a new idea, and eventually the market follows when they see success. So, I think your observations are spot on for sure. I'm curious, what's your background as far as, and you seem, I'm gathering you know a lot about the human body in motion. Is there a kinesiology background, or what's your, where do you come from?
Not necessarily, just kind of weaving my way through the rabbit holes of, answers to questions I might have. And I think once you obsess more and more about this or that and how it could be better, you start to trace the breadcrumbs as to, some ways to justify why it is or isn't working, or how it could be better, or how it got to where it is, et cetera. So, I think, somebody who just maybe cares about the body and so on, I end up just having a lot of conversations, doing research on my own and thinking about it on my own, and somehow maybe that pieces together to become my own understanding and so on. So I have friends that are podiatrists, some that are on the physical therapy side of it, some that are on the surgery side of it. I have a friend that's performed hundreds and hundreds of bunion surgeries and so on. He says that's the majority of the foot surgeries he does do. And it's also interesting to just see the difference in perspective of somebody that performs the surgeries and really feels like it's, most bunions are genetic, versus somebody who's on the therapy side of podiatry and feels that most people who have bunions are getting it from shoes that are crunching the toe boxes over 20 or 30 years or something. So it's just interesting to see two professionals in a very similar overlapping industry have completely different opinions. Yeah. And they might be getting different people. The guy performing the bunionectomy, I believe it's called, is probably seeing the most extreme cases where surgery is necessary. Yeah. Whereas the guy on the therapy side's like, I have knee problems, and it connects down to the way that you step rolls in a way that rolls your, like your tibialis in a way that's been stressing your, so it could be that more than the other. Yeah. So
right. Dang.
Yeah,
so what
just
does
chasing
you do for when you're not talking to people about tennis and the body? What do you do?
Well, I used to do a lot of music stuff, and I guess my tennis obsession slowly competed for my music obsession, and now it's starting to creep into more of a full-time thing that I'm doing this, and I think I have this vision where I'd really like to be an influence in the market in some way that can somehow accelerate bringing this kind of thing in. I have opinions that are similarly intense and passionate about maybe the way tennis strings should be, or tennis rackets should be, and certainly how tennis shoes should be. And that probably, branches out into all kinds of products and accessories. And I think I end up just, because I play tennis all the time, my opinions get tested on the court, but tennis is a good sport to test all kinds of things from shoes to sweatbands and so on. So I just want to make products better. I'm chronically frustrated with how far below the bar some things feel like they are, and it's just a system of so many things not fixing because what isn't broken, and I'm really tired of running into that. So I have my own brand. We'll see how much of this kind of stuff I answer in my own brand. I think shoes are definitely one of the harder things to answer, whereas headbands and sweatbands are way less hard. Shirts are even easier. Socks are kind of hard, the way I want to innovate socks, but I want to innovate these products and bring them to life and see them have success in the market, whether or not it's my company or a brand I work with, or just a brand that I think deserves some attention in a market that wants that product. I'd love to see all that happen. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. Maybe that's what I'll focus on. So far, it's going all right.
Cool. Yeah, as long as you can avoid molds, I think you can. I have faith you can innovate socks for sure. And then who knows? We can, as you've kind of alluded to earlier, maybe there's a way. Earlier in our conversations on Instagram, maybe there's a way we can we can stay in touch and figure some stuff out as well. I'm loving your not just your passion about it, but your knowledge about it and your insightfulness about it. It's great. It's wonderful so far to have this conversation. So
awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I hope to bridge the gap between, the manufacturer and designer's mind and then like the consumer's mind, who's also maybe capable of pushing the limitations and putting it into perspective and then meshing it with what's actually realistic on the manufacturing side. Because I think some people who get into this are like way too specific and way too, and then they don't have the mind of like, but scaling this at production and having it competitively affordable to you have to factor that in. You have to.
Yeah.
Have to.
Yeah. You're right. And oftentimes it's because people don't have the knowledge of what are the constraints, what are the manufacturing constraints, what are the physical constraints, what are the molding constraints. So if you arm them with them, like I have full faith that if you are armed with that knowledge, that you then take your consumer frustrations, the problems you want to see solved, and run them through the filter of, well, I mean, that'd be great, but that's physically impossible. Or the molding techniques aren't there yet, or there's no material that can do that yet. But there is this. That's where some real magic happens. Because we're fully transparent about it. Like the three of us, we're all former athletes, but soccer and running mostly. And some cycling. I played tennis when I was a kid because I didn't have a cell phone. Like it was a thing to do to pass the time. But I was a soccer nut. Like that was my sport. But we've made volleyball shoes that have got played in the Olympics. We've made soccer boots that were in the World Cup. Like, and we've made so many running shoes that have run so many marathons and whatnot. But we're not the by tennis player for tennis player kind of brand. We're like shoe experts that see a problem that people keep complaining about and want to do something about it, so to get people more active, more enjoying their sport. So for us, having, and I've got a cadre of people that I talk to like yourself that have that consumer perspective, but oftentimes those people don't really want to know what the constraints are. Like they don't want to be bothered. Like that's your problem. You can figure that out. So having someone who selfishly having someone I can talk to that has a desire to fix something, but also has the patience and the desire to learn what the constraints are. I mean, that could be a powerful combination. So just
I agree. Yeah, just to be more up to speed with how things actually are and the filters you got to run through. Yeah, because again, it's not just the manufacturing constraints; it's also the market's response to the product and the changes you're going to bring to it. I mean, that's a little bit less tangible than the manufacturing constraints in a way. Like, how is the culture going to respond, and what target audience is exactly going to be the most responsive to this? Like, you can kind of aim, but you're not going to be able to snipe for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct. It's so true. And even just, I spend as much time as I can doing, events, letting people actually play in the shoe, versus come on, just buy it. You'll trust me. It is what I say it is. The only way we all decide, right, is by using it. So I've done a bunch of pickleball events. I've done tennis events, and just that psychology of the culture of like who's more accepting as a group of something new, of something different. And you could probably take a guess, some of the stereotypes that exist around the tennis culture versus what's happening in the pickleball culture in terms of just an openness to newness, an openness to non-traditional, an openness to, hey, these guys are working hard. Let me give them a shot. There's pretty obvious differences when you spend time with these two groups of people.
Yeah,
look down.
I can imagine so. Yeah. Just the way people are about rackets, I think that's it's a clear identifier of which one is which. Yeah, I know my people.
So how long have you been playing tennis?
Oh, I think about 15 years. There's a good 10-year gap in there somewhere, but I came back missing the heck out of it, and I've been genuinely pretty addicted ever since.
Oh, so how long was the gap?
Almost 10 years. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I just...
it was just like life got busy kind of thing?
No, not at all, really. I played from ages, I think maybe like... I'm probably off slightly here, but it was about 2 years, and I think I was maybe from ages 7 to 9 or like 8 to 10. So you're just kind of doing it because maybe your parents got you into it, and then your coach and so on. So I think I recall just getting or having a coach, and if my coach is watching this, no offense, but just didn't really stimulate the parts of tennis that were fun for me. It was a lot of like, no, don't work on this, let's drill this kind of thing. And I think for a kid, it's really important to maintain the element of fun, because I think you risk just the kid maybe thinking that they hate tennis, which is ultimately what I thought. Yeah, but that wasn't the case. I look back, the reality was I liked tennis. I just didn't get to enjoy the parts of it that I liked very often. And I didn't have my own tennis friends because I'm like 8. I'm not going to, get in a car and meet up with my tennis friends when you're 8 years old. You just don't get to do that. So it was my parents bringing me to coaching sessions that I think ultimately burned me out. And it took about 10 years off until I just suddenly missed it.
Wow, very cool.
And I'm glad I had that foundation, because I was able to come back and kind of pick up where I left off on where my tennis was at. But, I'm probably a couple feet taller. And so on. So it was just nice to...
Wingspan's a little bit longer.
Yeah. So it wasn't like I came back with all my tennis skills completely gone. I think they came back pretty quickly, and I was able to, push from where I was to, where I'm at now on a pretty consistent path.
Have you?
I hate not playing.
Have you dabbled in whether it be pickle or padel or any of the other raging court sports of late?
I have not. I'm not opposed to playing pickleball. I don't see padel as much, although now that I've moved to Vegas, there actually is some kind of padel culture. I lived in Sacramento before. I think there was nothing. That may or may not be true, but I mean, I didn't see it. Now I see it. And the tennis shops here carry those paddles and pickleball. Of course, I think all the tennis shops have picked up pickleball probably just in the inventory. But no, I actually have not yet. I just end up playing tennis every time I have time to maybe play pickleball. I'll get around to it though.
But there's no padel courts where you play tennis?
No. I mean, in the city there are, but they're not like combined facilities or something, as far as I know.
Okay. It's funny, when we first started this a couple of years ago, the tennis, as you can maybe imagine, like my experience was, if I talked to a tennis player, it was the traditional it's pickleball is not a real sport. It's a beach thing. It's like a way to kill time. And then over the last couple of years, that is absolutely changed. It's more like I play some, and I can see why people love it. I mean, I still love tennis, but pickleball is so social, and it's always people there, and it's it's a fun way to it's the reflexes. It's a good time. There's more of a warmness to it. They're not necessarily changing allegiances. They're not changing their flags, but there's more of an acceptance of it as a thing, and as a way to maybe spend some time with friends and stuff. So it's been cool to see, because it's like, I don't know, I think there's enough stuff, without getting too, philosophical, but there's enough tribalism in the world. We don't need to create tribalism between pickleball and tennis. Like it's people that are out there exercising, trying to have some fun, as you mentioned, trying to be with people that they like or love even. What's wrong with that? Come on.
Yeah, that is funny. I think you're right. I think over time, tennis players have warmed up to pickleball a bit. I think it's just an exposure thing to some degree. Eventually they'll try it and they'll, kind of give it a shot or something. And I think it's, I wonder how much of the tribalism is due to just the tennis culture being the way that it is, and how similar the sports are, and how much of it is a direct cause of like the turf war of pickleball courts kind of competing for tennis courts. I know that both are influences, but it's hard to say which one is a stronger influence.
Yeah, and that's an obvious, that I say all that knowing that, if I can't go play tennis now where I used to play tennis, I can see that being a frustration. It just feels like the overall, what I've seen anyway around here in Atlanta, there seems to be more of a, hey, let's find a way to peacefully coexist and get everybody get what they need, versus where it seemed like it was a few years back, where it was just like, all right, there's only going to be one winner in this battle. Let's go. So that feels good, and that feels very hopeful to me.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out. I think the turf war and whatever, the culture war between tennis and pickleball has calmed down a little bit, for sure. Yeah, and I have plenty of tennis friends that do say the same thing, and I did not hear that early on, but it is that, they just sort of have like it's nice. It's actually pretty fun. It's, and then they definitely are consistently complimentary of the difference in like how social the sport is, whether or not it's because it's like doubles and you're closer at the net, or just something about the culture is more friendly and social. I do hear that a lot. Yeah, and I see that. I definitely see that.
Yeah. That's cool. Nice.
Could I ask you a few quick questions that were kind of specific to the shoe? I am...
Of course.
I'm very curious, like what inspired the confidence of the I guess would you call it a lace system? What would you call these? Like this, I'm referring to the strap Velcro system. I don't want to call it a lace.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
But some kind of securing
enclosure system or we literally respond, call it a strapping system. The interesting, what inspired the confidence?
Because I came into this and I constantly, I go against my own, like, sometimes I see a thing and I'm like, maybe this is actually good, or maybe it's going to disappoint me in the way that I expect. And sometimes I run into products that do surprise me, and actually it's like, oh, it's really, it's like way more functional than I would have expected. Yeah. So I'm glad that I was able to try the shoe, because my initial hostility, I don't feel the same way after trying it and testing it.
Right. You dismissed it out of hand. Right.
Yeah.
Honestly, the confidence came from the fact that, again, whenever we talked to tennis players, and it was mostly tennis players when we started, as far as who we were trying to solve problems for, besides the lack of cushioning and the forefoot fit, the huge issue was always laces. Whether it be I get the uneven lace pressure, I've got to stop mid-match and retie them, or I've tied them so tight that first eyelet pressure at the top of my foot is so bad that I cannot wait to rip my shoes off at the end of playing for an hour. Like, these are all things that, coming from the running world, where shoes have been optimized for comfort for so long, were like head scratchers to us. Like, what? Like, these things are that big, like, no one's figured out. And it's also like again, even in running, tongue creep. The fact that the shape of your foot and the shape of the shoe, your tongue almost always kind of starts to fall laterally on your foot to find a kind of homeostasis, if you will. So that's a problem too. So you're constantly pulling the lace up or the tongue back up and trying to fix that. So it's like, okay, we know, having done this for long enough making shoes, that the tongue lace system is not like, it's not like the wheel. It's not like we can stop iterating that. It's not the perfect solution for everybody. So let's really try something different. And then with the fact that once we decided we want to do a knit upper and really create that sock-like feel, the minute you put laces, a traditional lace structure on a knit shoe, you've got to add a layer between where the laces come through the eyelet and the foot. So now you're adding more stuff we didn't want to do. So we wanted to keep it as seamless as possible inside. No holes, no lace coming through. So if we're going to do that, then we really got to divorce ourselves from these laces. Because the first iterations, it's funny you bring this up, the first iterations didn't have quite the same confidence. There was a lace and a strap, kind of like old Air Challenger kind of, think of something like that.
Okay.
But then, again, working with a manufacturing partner, thinking about all these problems, like, well, they're really kind of redundant. If you do them right, one of them should solve the problem. You don't need both of them. So the shoe took, as most shoes do, a couple of years to make. And probably the biggest thing that kept us up at night was finding the right strap material. So we went through 4 or 5, maybe even more than that. But we actually sampled probably 4 where they would be stretchy enough to mold to your foot, but so stretchy that the foot would almost come off the bottom of the shoe. Okay, can't play tennis in that.
Yeah.
Or you'd find ones that were so strong that unless it was the exact length for your foot, it wasn't going to work because it couldn't stretch at all. So it was a lot of back and forth. And finally, we just kind of stumbled on at a material show out in Portland. My partner met with a vendor and he showed him this strap material. He's like, oh man, I think this might be it. It was kind of a new material that this vendor was putting out there. And sure enough, we bought some of it, put it on a sample, and it had that combination of strength and elasticity that was missing the whole time we've been developing the shoe. So without that strap material, quite honestly, the shoe would probably look very different. Because if we had run out of steam on that, we probably would have made a choice to do something different to try to solve that problem. So it was really that combination of knowing people hated their laces and then having that kind of just that luck of finding the right strap material at the right time to get it into the shoe. So
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Funny, your observation, I've heard that a few times. Like, hey guys, don't wear that. It's got a strap. It's never going to work because it's been done by others before, so therefore it must never be able to work. That kind of thing. I get it. I'm a consumer. You don't want to put your money out there. That's fine. But it's also why we do free shipping and returns, and we're very accommodating meeting with people like, we know this is different. This is why we do demo events. We know you're hesitant. How can we make it a little easier for you to try it? Because we think most people, when they try it, are going to go, they may not buy it on the spot, but they may go, oh, you know what? That is very different than I thought it was going to be. I think that they might be onto something.
Yeah,
So,
you might break the stereotypes they've developed about the reliability of a strap system or something like that, which is exactly what happened when I tried the shoe. And my observation was that a lot of it's, and I obviously wasn't there for the history of like how many straps you had to go through to get it just right, but I was surprised at how secure it was, and it did feel like the right balance of security, but also elasticity. And I felt like the thickness of it is what had a lot to do with that.
The width of it.
The width of it. I guess, I should say width, not necessarily the thickness. Yeah, but it just felt like something about the width is key to why this is so. And it kind of distributes the pressure maybe a little bit better too, just because it's wider when it's pushing down on the foot. So that was really good. And then you get the extra security from whatever that mesh-like material is that seems to be the primary like upper knit structure that is kind of the general structure of the shoe. Yeah, so I was wondering how that would work against like how much foam appears to be on the bottom of the shoe, because like typically the more foam that you manufacture below the shoe, the more stiff and rigid it becomes, which would, I guess against a strap system, make your foot more likely to lift out or something. So I was curious how that was all going to balance, but I don't think the shoe has quite as much foam as it looks like. It's because around the arch heel area, the foam kind of comes up to like contour and cup the foot more so than it does actually function as an extension of the cushion. So I think that's, there it is.
So the whole idea, you think about most tennis shoes, they have some kind of, some kind of stiffening device, typically on the lateral side of the midfoot, to kind of create a wall. So your foot, when you're cutting laterally, that you have something to push up against. But it's, and they work for sure. But it's another thing that we hear a lot of complaints about, like, oh my God, my feet hurt. They get so beat up by hitting that thing all the time. Is there no other solution that could possibly be developed? So what we came up with, the idea, the whole inspiration was like, can we sit the foot inside the sole? But the stuff you're mentioning is key. If we made the shoe one density, if we made these walls stiff enough to actually work and hold you, and the whole shoe is that, the shoe would be very stiff and quite heavy. So we're like, well, we want it softer underfoot, one, so it's lighter, but also it feels better. And so, but if we did the whole shoe in this black material, then these walls would be basically useless and would be mushy, and you wouldn't get any kind of support from them anyway. So is the key to the shoe from the underneath your foot is that this is a dual injection process where there's no glue in between these layers. They mold together simultaneously, and you get soft, light underneath your foot and firm, stiff around your foot. So you are, like you said, you're sitting deep in that shoe. I mean, so here's the last, and here's the shoe goes deep into there. So you're down, your foot's down here.
Yeah.
So you've got all that both laterally and medially holding you in there, as opposed to putting another piece of plastic, another something to bolster the wall. We let the one piece do that all by itself. So there's almost like an optical illusion of, oh my gosh, that thing is so thick. There's no way I can play tennis on that. Yeah. And it's meant to convey, like, yes, the shoe is very comfortable and cushy, but don't worry, it's not, you're not Gene Simmons in his Kiss boots on top of a tennis court. You're actually sitting, it's like a Formula One race car where you're sitting deep in that front seat, and it kind of comes up around you and surrounds you and stabilizes you all around. So, very good question.
Yeah.
And one that yes.
Wait, sorry, say that again?
A question I know many people have had because they've asked.
Yeah, that's the primary one that I see when that shoe is looked at or talked about. It's always that. Surprisingly, it's actually not the strap thing. They kind of see the cushioning, and then maybe that intimidates them before they get to the strap questions. right. I thought it might be the other way around, but it's Yeah,
I think it's where you come from. I think it may be 50-50. That's a good point.
Yeah, interesting.
Yes, the other thing too is it's funny you bring all this up because it goes back to like the culture thing, like and market acceptance, and like if we did everything we did on purpose, but it helped. I believe it helps that it does look different, because if we came out with a shoe that looked like you would expect any other shoe for the court to look like, who would notice? There's a million choices already. Yeah, when you're introducing something new and a new concept, it does help, and it may hurt some. Like we're not trying to put a tennis shoe on all 25 million tennis players in the country. So we're not worried about everybody loving it, but it's got to appeal to people that have had these problems that are looking for a solution, whether it be the laces or the fact that no shoes have enough cushioning or whatever their issue may be, that we've got a solution, and it's different enough to be noticeable for them to even look at. You know? But it's going to alienate people for sure. We know that. It already has. I mean, there's no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe they'll come back, maybe they won't. But
right, correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I mean, again, I use Hoka. Hoka is a big inspiration just from a branding perspective, because they came out with their shoe in the middle of the barefoot movement.
Oh, like when it was
the hottest, right? And so people were running in Vibram 5 fingers.
Yeah, I was going to say, was it in the 5-finger era? Yeah, that was like the...
Simultaneously, Hoka comes out, and they claim they're a barefoot, or people called them a barefoot shoe because they had low drop. But they had, twice as much foam underneath the foot as any other running shoe, even the most cushioned running shoe.
Yeah.
It was so different. And it was so, I was in charge of Mizuno running shoes at the time. And my thought was, cool idea. That's never going to work.
Yeah.
See what I know. But they had something different. They had something that warranted discussion, warranted discovery. And you're right. There's so many people who dismissed it out of hand, who now I guarantee you, if I go 10 years later, I go into their closet, there's probably a pair or two in their closet.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah. Hoka really blew up. I saw it. I heard that they had a lot of success in the ultra marathon world, which makes sense because you're running 70-ish miles on difficult technical mountain terrain. So it makes sense that, over the course of 70 miles, you can say what you want about barefoot shoes, but I think, the wear and tear on the body, minimizing that, I think Hoka obviously does.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. Like their whole insight was make a shoe that's better to run downhill with.
Oh, so really? Okay.
Super broad platform, super soft foam, so that it slows down. When you're decelerating, when you're running downhill. Like that was the insight. That's what spawned, over $1 billion company. It's really fascinating. So having those specific things you're trying to solve can lead you places that you never thought that were never even in your mind. It's a really fascinating story that where they've come from and where they are now. It's wild. Yeah.
That is very interesting. I didn't think that would all that cushion would be advantageous to like decelerating, but now that you say it, it's very obvious.
It was so like the foam was so distinctly soft compared to any other foam at the time in running shoes. Was all like a 55C durometer, so pretty firm durometer. Like it was more about being responsive than about cushy and slowing you down. It was slowing you down was almost considered antithetical to running, like you're losing energy, that doesn't make any sense. You shouldn't make a shoe too soft. But they had a different idea, and because of they were trying to solve a very specific problem that they thought that was the better idea. And now, again, every brand in the world has some kind of shoe like Hoka.
They do. They absolutely do, and it's funny to see that influence like appear in Altra. Ultra still stays true to some of its core design. Features. They definitely took a page from Hoka with some of the shoe models, like the Olympus or something, for sure. That's a Hoka influenced shoe. Yeah, and you see that across other brands, and it's like, yeah,
it's cool.
I'll share with you 3. This just kind of came to mind during the conversation. So I wonder if you have like 3 or whatever primary frustrations that seem to be consistently present in the just design of shoes. I would say mine are like shoes being so slippery, and which I get because you need to make the shoe easy to put on. I think some people just trying on a shoe, if they struggle to put it in, they'd be frustrated and wouldn't like it. But I think about how slippery shoes are on the inside, and it's like, well, that's why your toes are jamming up in the front, is because your shoe is so slippery inside. So that frustrates me. And that stacks on top of excessive heel to toe drop. So just standing in the shoe, your feet with such low friction want to slide to the front of the toe box. So it frustrates me to see shoes that are consistently so slippery and so steep with their heel to toe drop. And then, I think that and the narrow toe boxes, those are like my 3 big frustrations that all work together to just, slip and slide around your shoe. And
I'm curious, because I've been, again, having lived through the barefoot thing and the heel to toe drop was such a raging topic of discussion in running. When I was at Mizuno, what is a number that gets you concerned? Like as far as the heel to toe drop, where you feel it's excessive?
Oh, gosh, it's kind of a slippery slope. I mean, there's some numbers that just seem like that's absolutely too much. I can't really think of a use case where that's an okay number or something. Probably that'd be like 12.
Yeah.
12 just seems insane. I feel like maybe somewhere between 6 and 8 is kind of the upper end of what I can see. Like, okay. But if I'm designing the perfect tennis shoe, I actually wouldn't have 0 drop. I'd have a few millimeters.
2 to 4 kind of thing.
Yeah, something like that. Like that. Because 12 is crazy. I think I have some shoes that are closer to that than like the 5 or 6, and it's just crazy how unstable it is and mushy it is. And yeah.
And have you done your research as to why 12 is 12? I
remember a conversation with you saying something about the 6 millimeter cuts, and then just
we talked about
stacked, essentially. So that's why 12 was such a standard.
Right.
Because 6 was a standard.
It was shoe manufacturing constraints, which led to the standardization of a 12 millimeter drop. Yeah, it's crazy.
So what most people were either 6 or 12.
No, so the sheets were 12 millimeters thick.
Okay.
And so they were just cut with a die cut and just like the shape of a foot. So you cut one, that was your base, that was your 12, and then you cut a half of one for the heel, and you'd skive it. So from the heel back, it would ramp up. So by the time you got all the way to the back of the heel, you now had 2 12 millimeter thick die cut pieces stacked on top of each other. So it's 24, but in the front you only had that one, so it was kind of 24. 12 was the standard forever. Almost every running shoe I made in Mizuno was 24-12.
Wow.
And even though they were molded, even though we could have done whatever we wanted, it was because, that always worked. So why would we run the risk of changing all that? That's very much that kind of inertia thinking that happens all the time, not just in running or shoes, everywhere. It's crazy. Like somebody what if we cut out this 12 millimeter thick sheet and just drove, decades of athletic shoe development? It's crazy. So
interesting. I thought that was something that might have been like pioneered by Nike initially. I know Nike gets a lot of flack maybe from the barefoot community or something for kind of creating a shoe that ended up making the average mechanic of running to be more heel strike as opposed to toe strike or something, and then just every shoe after that kind of followed in their footsteps, so to speak. Does that sound like a familiar story? Oh, that
the 24-12 came from Nike, you mean?
Maybe not exactly the 24-12, but just having intense heel drop to kind of extend the leg stride in such a way, but it also sort of forced this mechanic of heel striking as opposed to toe striking that became normal over those years.
Yeah, I feel like I've certainly heard it put on them. Yeah, they've certainly probably more than anyone made it popular, right? That first running boom, they're a big player in that, but I'm not sure they're fully culpable for all of that, but
probably not fully, but maybe for some of the initial strides in that. Every word I'm saying, I feel like I'm trying to make some running joke, but I'm not. I say strides, I say fall on their foot. I'm not trying to be punny. I really try not to. It just happens sometimes.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Totally forgiven. Yeah.
Well,
so awesome. The slippery inside, that's an interesting one because it's funny in my experience in not saying I wouldn't just use the word slippery, but that feeling of when your heel slides into a shoe over whatever material is in the back of the heel. You've got the rabbit ears, whatever the case is in a traditional shoe. When your foot first goes over that, I think for a lot of people that predisposes them to think how this shoe is going to feel. Is it going to be cushy? Is it going to be soft? Is it going to be firm? Based on how that first feeling is. So I do think a lot of brands, and certainly something we've thought about, is like, what's that material like? What does it feel like to you? It should feel very good. It should feel very welcoming. It should feel whatever. But it probably does lead to a lot of those materials being, as you point out, slippery in the sense because it makes the foot slide over it. Yeah. And then you've got this internal environment that you feel like you're prone to moving more. You haven't found like a tactile sock or anything that helps kind of counteract that in any effective way?
I actually have, but they virtually don't exist. But I'd say a couple companies actually answer that pretty well. A bunch of them answer it terribly. I'd say there's a lot of Amazon socks that have like grip material, which is just silicone on the bottom, which is entirely moisture resistant, which is an issue because when it gets wet, it becomes slippery. So its grip effects are useless inside of a shoe. Maybe for like a yoga sock on a hardwood floor, it's kind of effective. And then, some of them have that on the inside and the outside, so it grips your skin and grips the outside. So But there's better companies, and almost none of them. But yeah, better ones use a much thinner material. I'm actually not sure what the material is, but it grips better. It's thinner, and it doesn't build up moisture in the same way. So yeah, that offers a lot of grip. But beyond that, which is already a huge upgrade, there's a couple of insole companies. One's a company called Gripliner.
Oh,
and he's kind of on pause.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you've heard of Gripliner maybe, but you just install an extremely thin, basically like sticker thick liner on top of your insole, and that turns it into a very grippy insole, which I really appreciate that product.
It holds well. It doesn't get bunched up at all through movement.
It's a good question, because for me it does, but for a lot of people it doesn't. So it's, everyone's way of stressing a material inside of a shoe is different. But yeah, for me, I actually have to, I have my own installation process. I will remove the adhesive backing layer on the grip liner. I'll just peel it away, and it's back down to the bare material, and I will like Gorilla Glue with their more flexible Gorilla Glues. Yeah, to my insole, and that's the only way that I can get it to reliably not bunch around. Because within about 2 or 3 hitting sessions, it will start to wrinkle up. The friction of the will overcome the adhesive and so on. But not everybody's going to have that problem. And I think if you're running, you're less likely to. But in tennis, the movement is so much more aggressive. Yeah, so
it makes a ton of sense. And they haven't yet to come out with an insole, a fully fledged insole.
They sent me a prototype one time, but I'm not sure that ever went into production or something. And that product is so cool, but it's like I can't tell everybody, hey, you should buy this and also, peel it back and then Gorilla Glue your thing onto your insole or something. I mean, that's just such a tough sell. It's ideal, but it's such a tough sell. So I do think that for the people that don't have that issue, great, but I can't guarantee that you won't have that issue, especially if you're a tennis player. And then, I think that just having an insole that offers that is probably easier. You just have to manufacture all the variations of insoles, which wouldn't be as bad as a shoe, obviously, but whereas the grip liner could just go on top of your insole. So pros and cons, but both products exist, which is nice. And that's been nice for me. It makes shoes harder to put on, but I mean, geez, it's almost, the difference in security is almost like your shoe could become untied and you wouldn't know. And I've had several friends on like D1 tennis teams, like really good players, play with that. And that's exactly what happened. I remember a couple of cases where for some reason the shoe lace came undone and they just didn't notice for like 30 minutes and the shoe was totally secure. So I think people really underrate the friction, inside of the shoe. And so I think also with some of the initial insecurities that came into, trying this FrankWorks shoe was that I felt like, well, if there is any issue with, movement inside of the shoe, given that there's a strap and like kind of a mesh system that may or may not have a little more give than other shoes, I think that I can mostly overcome that with the answers to slippage inside of a shoe that I've come with. So for me, that helped me be more confident coming in, and I think that's largely the reason that I'm comfortable like doing lateral slide movements in the shoe and stuff. And I filmed me doing that a little bit just to prove that it is possible, with the disclaimer that I'm using like grip liner to get that extra edge and confidence with that shoe.
Right, that's really interesting.
But I have it in all my shoes, so I mean, I'm not going to wear a shoe without that. Yeah. So
right.
Yeah.
I gotta look into that more. That is that could be a really compelling solution for a lot of people.
Yeah, let me know. I could send you some stuff that I've been because I've narrowed it down to the stuff that actually works, and I'd say 99% of the stuff out there is almost useless. And if that's your first impression of that product, again, it's just going to make the whole idea seem bad. But I have like 2 materials or companies in mind that are actually worth trying, and I'd say that everyone else that you could find on your own is not worth trying.
Oh yeah, I love that. Yeah, that would save me a ton of time.
Grip socks and insoles, and maybe there could be some collaborative manufacturing effort where like the insoles or whatever, maybe I was thinking if I sell it with these, because I'm not going to try to force everybody, it's a whole thing to like go from your standard insole to this. It's a huge difference, but it allows you to have the security without having to over tighten your shoe. And once you get used to that, it's like then you can do a lot of different things with the shoe design if you know that your customers are secure due to the friction and not like squeezing your foot inside of a shoe. So I think it opens up doors, but it's a matter of adjusting the culture and impression of that.
So let me ask you, if I can, what is the culture around this idea of a using a grip liner type product in your tennis shoe? Is just lack of knowledge? Is there resistance to it? Is there how do you like? Is this something you just found on your own, or someone told you about it? Like, how did that all come about? because it seems like a simple, I say simple, like simple insight, hard to do, hard to pull off. But it seems like, why isn't somebody already doing this in a big way?
I think there's a surprising amount of people who just don't consider that the friction in their shoe could be higher and that they'd benefit from it. Because I don't think there's a single shoe out there in any industry that really is different from one another in that regard. Almost none. I mean, there might be, but it's not a marketed difference. It's just a coincidence of whatever material is inside and whatever sock you happen to be wearing. So I think the majority of people just want a shoe that's easy to put on. And I think friction is probably a large part of that equation of like, oh, it's easy to put my shoe on. I don't want to fight to put my foot in, which is understandable. But for me, I do, because it's a litmus test for whether or not I'm going to be able to securely wear this shoe or not. But yeah, it's not a common complaint, I would say, even though it's a common problem and a common detriment to what I think is like optimal performance of a tennis shoe. It's just not something anybody's aware of at all. And their way of fixing that is to get a tighter shoe.
Right.
Yeah. So that is just the solution, and then that's kind of it. There's no further thinking.
Yeah. I won't be able to walk when I'm 52, but I just got the smaller foot now. I don't slide or follow smaller shoe. I don't slide around anymore. Oh wow. Okay. No, that's really good. Yeah. Any information you could pass along. First off, just helping answering consumer questions when they run into stuff like this, but more, kind of down the road thinking. Like, I'm always been a huge proponent of a Sockliner having an outsized impact on the performance and the feeling and experience that the customer has in your shoe. It's funny, we haven't worked at Mizuno. The kind of guys I work with in Japan were very like, oh, it's just a necessary evil kind of thinking around a Sockliner. And it was all about the engineering of the shoe itself. And not to say those things weren't important, but you could literally change the feeling of a running shoe, volleyball shoe, whatever, just by changing out that 5 millimeter thickness of that Sockliner to something that's better or more of something, more responsive, more cushy, whatever the thing you're trying to serve. There's somebody out there that's making that, and it can make a huge, huge difference. That's a fascinating thing. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I think it opens up some constraints that aren't appreciated, but could be. Yeah, I see things that could be better, but it's kind of a domino effect of like this change, and then it would allow for this change, and then all these changes together would make a massive difference. But yeah, you gotta walk people through that experience. But if their first experience is they've never heard this shoe and they try to put it on, and it's just hard to put it on because there's so much more friction, I'm just not even gonna try that shoe. Yeah, you gotta be motivated, or you have to understand that's like a little hurdle to get over that will pay dividends in the long run. And I think as soon as you notice that, as soon as you realize that for yourself, you're like, oh, I'll never go back. So that's why I get excited about these things.
Yeah, I can appreciate people looking at it and go, oh, it's too hard to get on. I don't want to put that on.
Yeah, so you got to let them know it's going to be harder to get on because it has more friction. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm kind of coming from like, I used to expect a certain fit from shoes, I guess, or developed a preference for one for fit because I didn't play hockey, but I always wore hockey skates because they allowed me the aggressive movement that I came to want from skates and so on. But yeah, it's very common in the hockey world to, if you go into a shoe store, they'll say, have about like a thumb's width of length or space between your big toe and the end of the shoe. In hockey, it's literally like have the front of your toe just feather the front of your boot, which is totally different. Like, cause you want it to basically just be a shell around your foot. So that's the kind of fit that I became accustomed to. And my brain putting that shoe on, or the boot on, the hockey boot, I really was absolutely focused on my foot basically not being able to move around at all. That was the priority. And any feelings of discomfort or something were just a proxy for that's a good fit, if that's the intention or something. Right. Yeah. So that's all changed now, but
that's good.
Yeah, it's just I think
you kind of gone the other way, really, right? You're wearing Altra, and like that's a completely different mindset than that what you just described. That hockey shell. That's fascinating. Yeah, see, people can change.
Yeah, gone the opposite way, but I saw the merit in that way of thinking, and then developed preferences, but wanted to satiate those preferences in a more foot-friendly way. Yeah, but there was just no way to do that. There was no culture or awareness about it, especially in hockey. It's like you just don't want your foot to move, so just lock it around as much as possible. In fact, get a boot that's maybe a little bit too tight, and then heat mold it. That's kind of what you do. Yeah, heat molding is like you literally bake your skates.
Right.
You bake your skates. You put them in the oven, and yeah, that's just what you do. So yeah, all these different industries have different cultures with different priorities and answers, and
that's so true.
Yeah.
That's true, yeah.
I'm glad Altra exists and has the culture does it, because it's like a reference point for this idea working really well for this reason. And I think you can point at running and the benefits of this shoe for running and bring that into tennis and use that as like it makes sense. It makes sense. Here's a company with great success and following because of this, and like this should be in a tennis shoe to some degree. And yeah, Altra is one of my reference shoes for shape and so on for a tennis shoe, for sure.
Have you played with any of their stuff?
Have I played in Altra shoes like tennis?
Yeah, have you tried? I know they had a cross training shoe they did a few years back. I don't know if you ever dabbled with it. Like if you're so like wanted to make it work, so you tried it, kind of thing.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, I have. I was going to say I've tried several of their running shoes for tennis. I've tried a bunch of their shoes for tennis, but they do have a cross training shoe. The one I'm familiar with is called the Solstice XT or something. It's not too. It's not excessively cushioned or anything. Zero drop, wide toe box, etc. Yeah, mostly mesh around the shoe. That was actually like pretty good. It was like a pretty good tennis shoe. I mean, it definitely, I would change some of the design things, but I was like, this is actually a good start. There's a lot of things that are kind of right. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, mostly in terms of like fit and stuff, not everything else. I definitely build up the shoe a little more cushion, a tiny bit of heel drop and stuff. But yeah, it's like with some small incremental changes, it could be a really good tennis shoe.
Right. Yep. Yeah. It's all just choices, right? Intentional choices.
Yeah.
What else?
Is there something else? I should probably wrap it up soon here. Let me see if there's like a crucial question that I should ask before we call it. Oh, yeah.
So remind me. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask, are you working on another tennis shoe? And if so, how is it different? Or maybe you're brainstorming one or envisioning one or something? Because you guys just have one model.
Yeah, we're probably more in the brainstorming phase right now. One of the reasons we got into this is coming from our past lives, the propensity to try to solve every single consumer bit of feedback with, we'll just make another product. We'll just make another one. And so what you end up with is within a brand, you end up with too many products that all basically do the same thing. And if you and it leads to quite honestly, it leads to an awful lot of waste because you end up buying all those products in a whole bunch of colors, and you buy them all 6 months before you know what anybody's going to want. And so a lot of them go from a factory to a distribution center, sit there, end of the season, they get sent somewhere around the world or discounted somewhere, and they end up in a landfill. Trying to avoid that normal process of just preemptively just making more stuff before you really know what is really being asked about. Reading the tea leaves of, okay, the customer said this, but what are, I'm moving around too much in the shoe. Well, maybe the solution is something we just talked about, and it's not necessarily a brand new shoe, to solve that problem. So making sure we're being thoughtful about that, and also as a startup, being smart about how and where we spend our money right now, and what are our objectives right now. So I do have some ideas around what potentially a second tennis shoe could look like for FrankWorks to sit alongside the one. I haven't fully fleshed it out yet because we're not that far down the road. But honestly, that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier. As I get further into that process, there could be a way that we could, have some kind of conversation, some kind of partnership, if you will, in terms of how that gets developed with the right, inputs coming from someone who's actually playing and experiencing these problems, that I would love to bounce even some of my initial thoughts off of and get your thoughts potentially, if you're up for something like that, into the mix at the beginning, and not to, when it inevitably happens, again, shoes are 2 years down the road. So oftentimes by the time you show somebody even an early sample, there's so much money already invested in that product, that if someone asks you something that requires any kind of substantial change, you're not going to really answer them with an honest like, oh yeah, well think about that.
Yeah.
It's more of a spin of, well yeah, but this thing already does that, and don't worry about that, like because you can't change it. So if you're not getting in front of this stuff and being intentional about it from the beginning, there's really very few chances to actually fix something much further down the road, unless it's a minor thing with the upper, maybe a material choice. Like your choices get limited very quickly when it comes to shoe development because it's so far in advance.
Yeah, makes sense.
Having people in the input session at the beginning is the absolute key, and it will be the thoughtful kind of process we intend to take before we spend, time, energy, money on building a new product. So I have some early thoughts. They need to be tested against some athletes, even just from a thinking perspective. So yeah, probably our hope is in the next few months, some things will change from a fundraising standpoint as a startup, give us a little bit more breathing room to do some new, more advanced stuff, and not so much worry about the day-to-day right now of getting through and hitting our objectives that we need to hit for as far as the shoes that we already own and the products that we're trying to get out to people and some of the things we're trying to achieve with the one. But it'll give us a little bit of breathing room to start thinking about the next one, if you will, the second one, whatever we end up calling it. So that's coming soon, hopefully.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just had to ask.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And would that be something you if I reached out to you again to talk
100%.
about? Figure something out? Yeah.
Definitely, please.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. And like I said, I really appreciated the conversation, and this is the kind of the thoughtfulness that you bring to it. I think would be really valuable. So,
awesome.
Really
yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think the shoe that you guys have now is an awesome, reference point. I think, a lot of things would be referenced from that, obviously, because you've already designed it. You've been through all of that, exactly, what it's like to reiterate those things or to potentially, change those things.
More from a little bit, of course, exactly. Yep, you got it.
Awesome.
And there is also quite a bit of kind of technical know-how in that sole unit that,
You talk about
the quote from our development partner was most brands would have given up way before we did as far as making it happen. Because when you have two different densities and two different durometers of those materials and you put them in the same mold, the cooling time, the pressure or the heat that they have to be at, the pressure they need to be under, and the cooling time for each of them to get them to fill the entire midsole mold to go up these walls with the stiffness and fill out here and to expand to the right length. All those things need to be tweaked and experimented with and iterated on. And so to get to here was a very, very long, difficult iterative process to make it, to reliably be able to do the two densities and to get it to be the right length, the right height, filled out, everything. So there is some advantage in being able to morph something like that now that we have know-how versus making something completely new and different. There's some stuff invested in here that we probably would first like to explore and see if we can come up with a meaningfully different product that solves another problem with this maybe as a starting point.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that is kind of key to what may or may not define some of the strongest reasons to check out FrankWorks or something like that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
I see
totally
that.
Agree. Yep.
Awesome.
Cool. Good. Awesome.
Yeah. Well, awesome, fun, stimulating, interesting conversation. I got to wrap it up, but that was great, and maybe we can touch base sometime. I'm curious what people think. Is it cool if I share this conversation? My goal with this conversation was to kind of like share it or take highlights of it, just to personalize.
Yeah, if there's anything you're questionable about, like, I don't know if you'd want anyone to know that. I don't think there's much of that in there, but you were upfront about that from the beginning, that your intent was to share it. So that's the kind of the basic mindset I came in with. And by the way, is your name John? I see John Coleman on the screen. Is that your name?
It's not. My name is Justin, but it's an alias to separate. I don't know. I'm kind of funny about my name. It's like once everyone knows my name, it's just out there, and I'll never get that privacy back or something. But
I appreciate that. It's safe with me, but I didn't want to refer to you as Time 410S unless you wanted me to.
Yeah. I wonder, the channel name is Time 410S, by the way. So 10S. Does that make sense? I did this to myself by trying to pick a clever name.
Okay, no, thank you. Yeah, now I'll never forget it. But yeah, it took me a second.
Yeah, no, it's. I wonder how many people get that on the first time. I don't think most would, and that's fair. But
that is really funny. For the life of me, I'm like, why?
Yeah, Y410S. Yeah, there's a reason, but it's kind of stuck in there. So. Yeah.
I think with the first couple of weeks in my mind it was 401S. Like, that's how my brain remembered it. So I definitely wouldn't have got there. So, but I did realize it was 4010. Okay, 410S. Awesome, love it.
I got to think about a way to like streamline people from seeing it to understanding what it actually is. Yeah, it's just a branding struggle that I created for myself.
I'm sure there's a graphic designer that can help make that a whole lot
probably
more intuitive.
Yeah.
That's good. It's a good starting spot for sure.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure we'll chat again sometime. And it was a great conversation. I appreciate your insight and experience just broadly, but also specifically with FrankWorks. It was fascinating.
Yeah, fantastic.
Awesome.
Great to meet you. Have a great weekend.
You too. All right. Catch you later. Bye.
All right. Take care.
Cool. Well, that was a good conversation. All right. Well, there you have it. Thank you again so much for watching. That was a very fun conversation for me. And if you made it all the way through to the end, I hope it was for you too. And it's been my desire for a while to be able to share those conversations with you. So if you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. The growth of my channel helps me do what I do, and it helps me continue to get guests like Rod Foley. You can get me a coffee. A link for that is down below. I'll shout you out in a future video. And all the links represent products that are my favorite. Toraline and Restring really make amazing strings. I have 0 in here with Enso in the crosses. I'm very much looking forward to hitting with that. In this racket, my Pro Kennex, which is currently my racket of choice, the Black Ace 105. You can watch my most recent video on that. Use my code to get a discount on these strings. There's shoes, electrolytes, and other accessories. And if you want to get a whopping 15% off of a tennis racket, there's a link below for direct tennis. Got to download the app, it's on iOS, but if you're set up to do that, you can save a lot on a brand new tennis racket. And there is also a link for this very shoe down below. No discount code yet, but if you're curious and want to try out this shoe for yourself, go ahead and grab a pair. And I'll let you know this, I might be working on designing a tennis shoe soon. So stay tuned for that and more, and I will catch you guys in the next one. All right, take care.